Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Moving into the Future. Today, I'm joined by Ryan Teicher, CEO at Redcom, Design and Construction, based out of Westfield, New Jersey. Ryan, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
No, it's my pleasure. Today, we are in the Redcom office. I've gotten a tour of the space, got to see the operation today. It's a beautiful office.
Thank you.
That you've built out here. And for our listeners, can you tell us a little bit more about Redcom and the operation you run over here?
Yeah, sure. We've been in this space since about 2017, but we've been around since 1982. Jim Reddington started Redcom as an engineering and construction firm in New Jersey, built up the business, and in 2010, after our current owner, Greg Reddington, took over the business, merged with an architectural firm, and they were previously called Redco, and the architecture firm was the M that made us Redcom and kind of made us, completed us. So we've been operating as Redcom Design and Construction since about 2010-ish, and we're a full-service design and construction firm. We have in-house architecture, civil engineering, and construction personnel. We focus on markets that are industrial buildings, and our niche is really auto dealerships. We've been building auto dealerships for about 30, 40 years.
Yeah, if there's one thing about New Jersey, it definitely doesn't lack dealerships.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a good business to be in here.
It's good for business.
But what's also good for business is having a full service in-house design and construction units, between the two, because what that allows for is a lot of streamlining, a lot of creative solutions, and a much better client experience, for the people you service. Can you tell us more about that in the sense of why it's worked out so well for you? What was even the origin of it? Like, how did you see this evolution becoming, and what was the strategy behind that?
Yeah. You kind of touched upon two of our core values: creativity and collaboration, and those are harbored in our office because we're in-house. It allows us the flexibility to make quick decisions. One of the big problems with the construction industry is you'll have a GC in one building, you'll have an engineer in another building, and an architect in a completely different building. And to get all of those professionals together is nearly impossible. We're all in the same building, as you saw from when you walked around our office. We have this special room that we call the hangar, and all of our departments are in pods, but those pods are separated by a walkway that has tables, sitting height tables and standing height tables, where each department can get together, get around that table, roll out a set of plans, and solve problems.
Exactly, and that's why it's huge. You get things done, not on a moment's notice, but in a day's time. Whereas, as you were saying, if you're dealing with a GC in one building, an engineer in another, and an architect in another, you got to schedule time for everybody. It might be over Zoom. And that level of collaboration and creativity that you mentioned as your core values becomes much more difficult. And when you're dealing with clients as complex, especially in the industrial arena, you mentioned dealerships. I saw some of your portfolio out here included gymnasiums. You mentioned the cannabis dispensaries. All very complex and unique projects. We talked about United Way. Mm-hmm. So when you're doing that level of projects, a lot of times either expansion or ground up has to be done on a lot of tight timelines too, and we can discuss that more when we're talking about the car dealerships. But it needs to happen fast, but fast and safe. Where the solutions that you're finding are logical and can be done, within the reason and budget of the project.
Budget's an important one also. Value engineering is the huge topic in the construction industry. And, it's value engineering is not cutting scope. Value engineering is finding means and methods that are more cost effective or substitute materials. And we have the ability throughout the design process to have our estimators jump in and review the drawings midway through the design, 30, 60, 80%, and really discuss with the architect, with the engineer, with the construction project manager early on, different means and methods, different substitute materials, to make sure that the client is really getting their value and the design is not happening in a vacuum.
Yep. And the advanced group operates actually a lot of the same way. And it's interesting to have this conversation today, because what you do with construction and engineering and architecture that we're discussing is, you're building the bones of the building, and, you give it its structure and its life in that sense. But then what we do at the advanced group with, office moving, furniture installation, IT services all under one roof too,
Yep.
is incredibly unique. A lot of times the mover is one company, the furniture installation is one company, and then the IT vendor is another company.
Yeah.
And to do that all in-house, we give the buildings life, but we're able to strategize and communicate together from a logistical standpoint where, we need the electrician in here, the same day that we're installing the spines of all the workstations, so
Yeah.
that we can run all that low voltage cabling. And, we want to get the tables up and running before we do the low voltage in the conference rooms, like we see here today, with your setup. So it's all of those components, and that's a similarity we have between our two companies, where we're all working together. We all know each other,
Yeah.
so we understand how we work together, what we need to hear in order to have success on these various projects. So yeah, we understand that very well too.
Yeah, it's also great from an accountability perspective
That
for the
too.
client.
Yeah.
Client has one neck to wring,
Yep. That's
essentially.
one throat to choke, is what they say.
Yeah. I mean, there's no finger pointing. Your fingers are only pointing at yourself.
Yep.
And for you guys, the mover, snapped a cable or something, it's still all your responsibility.
Yep.
For us, something was missed on the design. I mean, much costlier mistakes in my world. But if something was missed on the design and and the construction guy figures it out, we fix it.
Yep.
We take care of it.
Yep, that is important. But I did want to talk about some of the car dealerships that you work on here, because I mean, anybody from the tri-state area, if you're going down Route 9 in Fort Lee, you pretty much, right? Is that right?
Well, the Route 22 is here. Route 9 we've done a bunch. Route 46.
Yep.
Route 10. Yeah. We're all those highway stores, we've touched them.
You can't go more than a mile without seeing a car dealership down there.
Yeah. And hopefully a Redcom sign.
Yeah. Now I'm going to be looking for it. See, now I know. That'll be good. That's good for the podcast too. It's a cross promotion.
That's right.
But so tell me about those type of projects. So, because what's unique about them, obviously from the ground up level construction, you're dealing with a showroom space, which is unique in its own right, from a lighting standpoint and ceilings and all of that type of design. An office space in the background, which is a little bit more standard. You'll have that set up. But then also you have the service areas and garages.
Yeah.
What are those like, and how do you approach those with different clients? What makes your solutions unique? Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, so they're really complex. You don't realize how complex of a building it is until you really dig into the details of it. But like you said, there's all those different departments are interrelated. And the 40 years of experience that we bring to the table is that we know how these dealerships operate. So, the finance department and the sales floor and the service department and the parts department, they all have to work together and they have to flow correctly. So when we're starting a project, very early on in the schematic design phase, each brand, so to speak, all these dealerships have different brands that they represent. Each brand has what's called a DID book, which is their basis of design. So it tells you the different colors to use, different materials to use, lighting fixtures. It tells you, in some cases, it'll tell you how many desks for service writers you need, with the volume of cars that they sell or service. So there are basic guidelines. And what we do is we take those guidelines and we apply them to the specific site. So, when it's a ground up, it's relatively easy. You just kind of take their guidelines, talk to the owner about how they want the flow to work, and we come up with the schematic design. On these renovations, it's much more difficult because the program has changed, and in a lot of cases, you got to gut the space and redesign it and reprogram it.
And they're still working through that too, right?
They're still working through that too. Yeah, they have to keep selling cars. And what's interesting is in a lot of these cases, you would think that their car sales would go down during construction, but volume and business goes up.
Really?
It's actually a fact. We've had dealers tell us that their volume has gone up. They have these huge signs out in front that says under construction, we're still open,
Yeah.
come in, don't pass us. So consumers think they're going to get a good deal, and they will.
Wow.
Yeah, they want to keep volume up. So it's, for those consumers out there, it's a great opportunity to go into a dealership that's under construction.
So if you see the Redcom sign, that means buy a car.
Right. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
So
is fascinating.
So it's challenging for us from a logistics perspective because these car dealership sites in New Jersey are never big enough. They're always short on space. And to have a construction company come in, we usually need a trailer. We need a storage area for a laydown area for materials. So fencing, signage, and logistics are really super important. We have to work hand in hand with the owners to make sure that they know where we're working so their people can be in a different space. The place has to be super clean all the time because customers are still coming in, and it's the first impression for these guys. And it's really important for us to be quick, be clean, and try and make it like we're not even there.
Yeah, which is
hard.
a hard thing to do in construction.
It is.
Especially when you're gutting places too.
When you're gutting places, you're changing the complete image.
Yeah. And typically, like, how long do those projects take? I mean, obviously it varies. I understand, based on the space and stuff like that. But, are there any examples of like recent projects where, you are working within a specific timeline to get this renovation done, and you found ways to either, decrease, on the time it took, or find creative solutions like we were talking about before with your in-house strategy that's helps you service your client better?
Yeah, so these projects typically run anywhere from 9 months for a big renovation to 18 months for complete ground up build, and actually sometimes the renovations take just as long because they're phased. You have to do one space, get them in there, and move on to the other space. But there's also really heavy constraints for the dealership owner because the brand wants the project done as quickly as possible. So the brand gives incentives to the owners. In some cases, it's aggressive financing structures. In some cases, it's the opportunity to increase their volume of allocation of vehicles, which is huge for these highway stores. And in other cases, it's just cash. But there are timeframes that we have to abide by that the brand sets in their deal with the dealership owner. So in a lot of cases, they're realistic. In some cases, those timeframes are unrealistic. So there was a dealership that we just started, or that we just completed on Route 22 in Union, and the brand said, you got to be done by December. Well, our schedule really had us into February and March. So we worked with the owner. We reconfigured some of the phasing plan. They were a tremendous partner with us. Anytime we had a question, they answered it immediately. They were great payers, which helps us pay fast. So it was just a fantastic partnership, and we ended up getting that project brought in, and they were open before December.
Oh, nice.
To get their incentive, to hit the holiday market, and they had their grand opening, and it was amazing.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. That's great.
Awesome. It was an awesome partnership. We definitely couldn't have done it on our own without the help of the owner of the dealership.
And two, when you're talking about, these different dealerships and some of the issues that they have, whether it be around where their different verticals are positioned. So, you mentioned sales, you mentioned finance, you mentioned obviously the technicians and things like that. What are some of the creative solutions that you offer, to help them either maximize their space or save on budget or allow for a better customer experience? Can you highlight any of those? Yeah.
There's two examples I can give you. One we're working on now, a dealership that we're renovating an existing building. So this is a great one for us. The dealership is in a different location right now. They have a second building that they need us to renovate. So they're not on premises. we have, free reign of the property, which allows us to move a lot faster. But they're tight on space on the lot. It's a small lot. They don't have enough room to park their cars. So we designed a ramp on the side of the building that goes along the building all the way up to the roof, and the roof is being repurposed as a secondary parking lot to store vehicles.
That's an incredible use of space.
Yeah. So one of the things you have to think about, which is really unique about this, is all right, you have some pretty bad winters here. How are you going to get a plow up that?
Right, yeah.
So we put radiant flooring.
Wow.
We put radiant flooring on the ramp, and they're not going to have to worry about ice and snow throughout the winter. Yeah.
That is incredible intuitiveness and design. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, and that's the fun part.
Exactly. That is when you can come up with solutions like that, because when you're talking about a portfolio and building out a portfolio, especially when you specialize in, something like car dealerships, that's something you can take to future clients and show them and show them the practicality and the creative solutions that you have, because even though it is an incredible solution for your client, it's not like it's exactly complex in any sense. I mean, it's essentially just building a ramp and then using the space on the roof in a more functional way.
Yeah.
So that's really, really cool.
Yeah.
You said you had one more example?
Yeah. There was another one, which is an interior example. This client also was short on space. They didn't have a place for their finance department in their floor plate. So what we did is we suggested moving the finance department upstairs where their main offices were. And at first, they had a difficult time understanding how that would work. They had an elevator that could bring their clients up, and the brand wasn't on board either. So a lot of our job is being the negotiator between the brand and the dealership owner. So we came up with this idea. We pitched it to the owner. They loved it, and then we pitched it to the brand, who eventually came on board. And that was to take the finance department, move it upstairs, so that it was out of the way of the sales floor. It freed up some space, and it also took their customers who are waiting to see the finance department and have that final round of negotiation and paperwork out of the sales floor and out of the way. So, if you have to sit and wait for a finance manager,
right,
you're not sitting there and waiting with a puss on your face on the sales floor. And, they had some entertainment, refreshments,
right,
and video game consoles for the
really?
kids up there.
Nice.
So it really ended up working out great for the dealership and for the consumers, because they had a lounge to kind of hang out and wait.
And now, you mentioned that you have to present it to the brand.
Yeah.
When we're talking brands, and we don't need to use them by name, but I'd imagine like luxury brands are probably far more strict, like about things. Or I can
Not
ask,
necessarily, actually.
Was this a luxury brand?
This was a luxury brand. They weren't. This one happens to be relatively strict. But it's not, you would think that the luxury brands would be more strict, and you would also think that the dealerships, the build out would be more expensive for the luxury brands.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily the case.
Really?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, Hyundai, the dealership, came out with this gorgeous design. It's very expensive to build, but it's beautiful. Mm-hmm. So, you would think that they would be on the more economical side, but some of the more luxury brands have a little bit of a simpler design, and it's also gorgeous, but it's not as expensive.
Right.
Yeah.
And now, will they take that design idea that you gave them, and will they apply it, or do you know if they apply it to like other offices in their portfolios?
I don't know.
I don't know. Money on that.
That's it. Yeah. Well, that's the value that we bring.
Right. Exactly.
So hopefully they won't, and they'll come to us for the ideas.
Right. No, that's why I was wondering, because again, those type of practical solutions, and that's the beauty of having the design eye and then the construction kind of background, or like I should say backbone maybe.
Yeah.
It allows for those type of solutions to happen, and again, simple yet effective, and it goes a long way towards the client and the customer experience. And it's the things that they remember too when you're in the service business. We're in the service business, and then they're servicing, obviously, the consumers there. And however you can go about it in order to make that better for them, goes well. What are some other type of projects? I mean, again, we've talked about the car dealerships, and I saw some of the other projects in your portfolio. Are there any other highlights that come to mind for you?
I mean, we build a lot of industrial buildings.
Actually, I wanted to talk to you about that, in terms of, because we had talked about this separately, but in terms of your outlook on like the industrial market in New Jersey,
Yeah.
what do you think about that right now?
Good timing that you ask me right now, because I think things are starting to loosen up a little bit.
Yeah.
My opinion of the market is that interest rates went up, and investors in the industrial market got a little nervous. They took a step back because their deals weren't penciling at the time. And anybody that's been in this business for 30 years know that interest rates today are still not what they were back then.
Right.
They're still not terrible interest
Not in
rates.
the double digits.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So if you have the memory to go back that far, you remember the double digit interest rates. So people started to get nervous because we had almost unrealistic expectations of what interest rates were. So a lot of investors were sitting on the sideline with projects ready to go, not interested in building them. I think rents are starting to level off and get to the point where these deals are starting to pencil again, and investors are starting to adjust their expectations so that we're starting to meet in a good place now, and investors are starting to get back into the market, and projects that were on ice are now starting to come back into the market.
And some of those projects, are they more ground up development projects?
Yeah. They're redevelopment projects. So one project that was on the sideline that we're going to get started in the next few months is a conglomerate of a bunch of buildings in an industrial zone. Developer came in, bought all the buildings, and is knocking them down and redeveloping that into an industrial space.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, because again, being in the moving and storage business, we're closely connected to that as well, in the industrial market. And for what it's worth, I service a lot of industrial clients, with various, moving logistics and storage needs. And it's been fascinating. And when we first talked, we talked about like the Amazon bubble and that entire component where they were just buying up warehouse spaces wherever they can find them, and building warehouse spaces wherever they could find them. And now that seems to be leveling off.
They're empty.
Yeah, I know. So it's going to be fascinating once those go back to market and what that does, to the cost and price of these units. But I think it's coming, like if it's not here already, it's coming soon, where we're going to start seeing, a lot better deals, because storage is, it's very expensive, and we're looking for other opportunities. But it's hard to find, the right ones.
Yeah.
In terms of other industrial practices, and this is why I was interested in talking with you today from a construction background. You mentioned in the 80s and the 90s and the economics ups and down. And specifically with construction right now, the price for material is extremely high, and we were talking about estimating projects before. And those different components. How do you work around that? Like, is it just a fact of the matter right now? But like, how do you find solutions? Or like, do you tell clients like this is just what it costs right now? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, there are a bunch of different factors that play into it. It's really challenging for us because, let's be real, a $12 million building is really expensive.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money that somebody has to part with. And they really have to trust us in order to hire us to build a $12 million building for them. And we know that. So it takes a long time to cultivate a relationship and to sell our services for the construction of a building. So from the time that we meet this client and we give them a high level ballpark of what they think the project is going to cost, it could be a year later that we actually build the building. It's a totally different price.
Yeah.
So costs, from COVID, costs went through the roof. And I guess suppliers and manufacturers realized that they can get the numbers that they were getting, and they haven't really come down too much. Some of the commodities have come down a little bit. A lot of them have leveled off, and the increases that we saw a couple of years after COVID are slowing down. But what's happening now is that because the volume of projects was decreasing this year, subcontractor availability was becoming they were becoming more available. So subcontractors are getting a little bit more aggressive with their pricing. So there's a point now where we're able to kind of level off and find some savings for clients by rebidding projects that we bid before because our subcontractors are more aggressive and more eager for work.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So we're constantly we're out in the industry checking the costs of commodities, making sure that the pricing we're getting is appropriate, and we're shopping around our subcontractors. We have relationships with vendors, and we're checking them. We have to. It's our responsibility for our clients.
Well, it's again, and we were talking about just the economy in general, and like the construction economy. See, people don't understand it, and I hardly do, and I am in the industry, even though like a step away. But people don't understand. The world around them is built on all of these different, whether it's wood or brick or what have you, cement, steel. These variable costs and the logistics of it, which I think a lot of people learned about during the pandemic, is like the
supply chain.
I was going to say, the global supply chain.
Yeah.
That people, you don't think about it, but it's such an important role in making all of these things happen. And obviously, as you mentioned it's interesting to get your viewpoint as a CEO about understanding that, these commodities are going to be more expensive because that is what the market dictates. However, because things are a little bit slower right now, you're able to negotiate or work with your subs in order to still give them a fair market price. But, it's going to be competitive considering the nature of the market right now.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating. And, you've been in this industry your entire life, really, right?
Yeah. I was born into construction.
So you know it well. And like you've seen, the upturns and the downturns and everything like that. So have you always been in like commercial construction?
No, I actually started in residential.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, my father was a home builder.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and my first job was actually the assistant to the laborer.
Walking around with like not the toolbox, but
I wasn't allowed to carry a hammer.
The nail bin, right? The nail bin.
Yeah, I started off with a broom. That was my tool, sweeping out houses. And then eventually I graduated to be able to carry a hammer, but I couldn't use it to drive any nails into wood. My job, when you build a home and you frame the house, before the plywood goes on the outside, you have to put bracing up to hold the walls up. And then you put the plywood on and it keeps everything in place. So what my father had me doing was taking the bracing down from the houses that got sheathed and storing it in a pile to be able to use on the next house. So there you go, being cost effective.
That's right.
And saving them. The problem is that there were nails in those 2x4s. So when I got the hammer, I had to take the nails out of those 2x4s.
So I was right, yeah. And you'd have a little pail.
Yeah, that's right.
And you put the nails back in.
Yep,
right, yeah.
Yep. So those nails they had to go in the garbage, but those 2x4s had to get nicely stacked to be used on the next house.
Hey, listen, that's a good job to start out at.
Yeah.
So then from there, where did it take you?
So that was in my high school years and
First
college
jobs,
years. Yeah. When I graduated college, I wanted to move. I wanted to go into the real world. I didn't want to go right into the family business. So I moved up into Manhattan, and I worked as a project manager for a GC for a couple of years. Then eventually my father called me up and he said, "Hey, business is growing. Would you mind coming into the business?" And I did. I worked with the family for about 13 years. And then kind of decided the family business was growing. We're always talking about business. Got a little stressful working with family, and I was young enough to be able to kind of expand on my knowledge. So I decided to go into the commercial world, and I went to work for CBRE.
Oh,
actually.
Nice.
Yeah, I worked for CBRE for about 10 years, doing construction project management. Then I worked for a couple other organizations, and then I was introduced by a friend to Greg Reddington, the owner of Redcom, and I ended up coming here.
Nice. So when did you start at Redcom?
January of 23, so about a year and a half ago.
Oh, nice. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. And yeah, we were talking about it. So what's nice, to come on to an organization like this where already well established, already a local staple, if you will, and well known in the community. We were talking before. You're a little bit of a tech geek.
Yeah.
And we were talking about some of the technologies that Redcom has, and you're working to help those technologies speak to each other and operate together, which I find is like a fascinating part of not only running an organization, but like also just working in general and like operating efficiently. We're doing the same thing at the Advanced Group. So can you tell us more about that in terms of like, you use Revit? And tell us the other ones that you work with.
Yeah, so we have our newest toy is the Matterport camera.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so that's a camera that does a 3D image, and it translates it to the web. It gets all stitched together, and then you can download it on your machine, and it integrates with Revit, and you can kind of trace the image to create existing conditions of a building for renovation purposes. It's a great tool. It makes us more efficient. If an architect is doing existing conditions, they go out to the site, take photos, they take measurements. If they missed a measurement by accident, in the past, they would have had to go back out to the site, wherever it is in the state, and get that one measurement. Now, with the Matterport, it's measurable on the screen. So it's to scale. So they pull up the image on their machine, and they can circle around and look up, look down, take measurements of anything that they want, and it goes to the 1/8 or 1/16 of an inch.
Incredible.
In accuracy. So it saves us a tremendous amount of time.
And now, does Matterport speak with Revit? So like, because Revit is a design tool, and Revit was like the evolution of AutoCAD, where AutoCAD at the time when that came out was like the greatest technology that had happened to the architect and design industry.
Yeah.
And now Revit allows for 3D models, whereas AutoCAD was 2D. So with Matterport being like almost 4D, I guess, kind of.
It's like virtual reality.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So with those two speaking, you're able to like, get those measurements to within a 16th of an inch and then upload it to Revit. And then Revit, you can do your design and have all of your components and units in there. And again, from an efficiency standpoint and accuracy standpoint, like what that allows you to do internally and then how you'd allow to deliver that to the client is like so next level.
Yeah, and you can take it even to another level because Revit can integrate with our estimating software, and the estimators are putting together their budgets for a project, and we can now input our unit pricing into Revit. So, for example, if the architect is drawing a wall and it's a 60-foot wall, we price that 60-foot wall. We inputted our unit cost pricing for the whole assembly, and they change that wall from 60 feet to 50 feet, and the budget changes.
Yeah, and it updates automatically.
Yeah.
And even too, we were talking about like all of the materials and things that you need. It keeps like
quantities.
Quantities
Takeoffs.
on that as well too. Yeah, takeoffs. And again, that saves a ton of money in the long run because when you have to either take that back to the client, you eventually have to take it back to the client. And let them know it's either going to be this, and it's not a situation where you're on site and you got to tell them like we forgot to include this. It avoids all of that. So that's really great.
Yeah, it gives the client the opportunity to also evaluate changes that they want to make before they have to make it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And quickly.
Yeah.
And, at a very fast pace comparable to even 3 years ago. It's moving much faster.
You want to add this wall, it's going to cost you $100,000. Well, that's a little too much. Maybe I don't want to add that wall.
Yeah, right. Well, Ryan, I'll tell you what, I think our next podcast is going to have to be about technology and AI.
I'm in.
Because we're getting a little carried away here. But I appreciate you coming on. This was a great conversation. Thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
No, it's my pleasure. Great. Yeah, this was great. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for listening.